I know why you clicked this video, right? I know why you clicked on this. You want juicy Rostermania intel, don't you? Juicy Rostermania details. You want to know all the teams. You want me to just put it all out there on the table, right? Who's going where? Who's getting dropped? Where's the drama? Guess what? Think again. Think again. You think you deserve the Rostermania intel all at one time? I don't think so. That's not how it works, all right? We're going to keep you on the brink of starvation. We're going to drip feed you morsels just to keep you surviving. That's how I would do it, honestly, if I had an OnlyFans. Did you guys see, this is totally not even Halo related. Did you see the tweet from Sophie Rain, OnlyFans, who made 43 million in 1 year? Did anybody see that? We should all change our direction in life. You know, we've been doing it all wrong. 43 million in 1 year. Insane. What a beautifully complicated, flawed world that we live in. So, all right, so Rostermania, do we actually have reasonable intel today to do like a summary? We've got a few confirmed rosters. The overarching theme of today's discussion is teams that can beat OpTic. That's the idea today, okay? Because I feel like the last few videos, I've just been talking about OpTic. And SSG a little bit. Obviously, I think if there's any God squads in the scene currently, it's OpTic and SSG. But everybody else, this is kind of what I want to focus on, right? Teams who could beat OpTic. Because that's the big question. I think it's safe to say that, like, this OpTic roster, this is exactly what Formal wanted. It's the best looking team on paper, right? You could argue SSG, sure. Everything else, though, can they even compare? Is there any combination of players that we could put together that can compare? And we're going to start with Europe. ITB officially announced their roster, and I like what I see. I'm not going to lie. Woodham, Wonderboy, or what was the coach? Snipe Drone, SLG, and Glory to round out this roster. What I like about this team is, and like my kind of perspective here, is for the greater good when it comes to Europe. This team is for the greater good, if that makes sense. Europe's a smaller scene, and what they did last year is they made two top-tier teams that were just about evenly matched. You had ITB and you had Quadrant. You can call the 8 players in those teams kind of like the elite 8 of Europe. I think like in combination of like individual potential and accolades in the sport and experience, like it's kind of like the elite 8 is what those two teams were. And they were balanced in such a way where they were very competitive throughout the entire year. Quadrant had the clear edge online, but when you look at LAN stats, back and forth, right? Like if anything, ITB had more top 6 finishes, but they ended up in the same general spot. What I think Europe has done now, their strategy, and I think this is the right strategy, it's cool to have two teams that are competitive with each other, but when you came to NA, that none of them had any potential to be top 3. What's Europe's best chance of creating a roster that could be top 3 that is on the level of the Quadrant with Legend before Legend left Quadrant? It's this roster, I think. This is the closest I think that we've gotten on paper to having a team that can contest like top 3, a team that, you know, maybe can beat OpTic. It really depends on the potential of these players. I've been waiting for the SLG Woodham link up for a while now, personally. SLG, maybe I'm a fanboy. I don't know. I'm not super well versed when it comes to European Halo players, but I think SLG, in my opinion, is like the top prospect. If I was like an NA roster picking up somebody, SLG is kind of in this sweet spot where he is kind of an older player now. He's 28, but he's accomplished a lot. He was a main slayer alongside Legend when they were at that peak with Quadrant together. I call him French Lucid. I don't know if that's like doing him a disservice, but his gameplay and his aim and his flexibility with his sniper kind of reminds me of Lucid's POV, basically. So I think he's nasty as hell, and he's got the experience and the veteranship to prove it, to the point where he's in a sweet spot right now, where I think he's kind of like the most attractive pickup in Europe. But as far as like one single player with the most potential in the entire European scene, I must say it's Woodham. Woodham is 18. He hasn't even been competing for a full year, right? Like, I guess he played in Europa Blackpool, which is over a year ago. But his first major was Arlington less than a year ago. He got top 6 in his first performance. He has 2 top 6 finishes. He's got the iconic mouse and keyboard photo where he's holding it up. I wish I had that on a link. It's clear that he's got an incredible amount of potential. He learns and he adapts very quickly. Now that he's with this better looking team on paper, I feel like he's got a better chance to like unleash his full potential. But one of the biggest reasons why I think he's that top prospect, it's not just because he's young, because of his accolades so far. I want to believe in M&K. Nobody on M&K has gotten as far as Woodham. He comes out of Splitgate, right? He was a top performer in Splitgate as well. If you watch his POV is insanely clean. The thing with M&K is you've got this flexibility to do an insane amount of damage. Like, you can do more on the map than anybody on controller. But it's a gift and a curse in a sense that, like, not all damage is good damage. Ryan has this concept in his like behind the curls video. He talks about being strong. And I think what he meant was like this idea of like good damage and bad damage. Like there are situations like an oddball, let's say in streets, where it makes sense to not engage with players who are too far away and instead take the fights that are close. You take damage from somebody in A while you're at C and you should be fighting like driveway, let's say. That's bad damage. That's like being weak, not being strong, right? So Woodham's M&K ability it comes with the flexibility to deal an insane amount of damage and involve himself in so many different fights simultaneously. But that's also like a temptation. Not all fights are fights you want to be a part of. Any damage that you take across the map by being a part of all of that action could limit you and limit your opportunities to help the team in the critical fights that matter. So I think that's the dynamic for Woodham, is like finding that sweet spot of being that damage dealer, being a highly flexible player, leveraging the advantages of M&K and his individual ability without going so far that, there it is, thank you, Brow. Oh, you found it from the actual like Smug Mug photo shoot. This is pretty dope. But yeah, being that kind of superstar level Slayer without taking it too far, being in a bad position or, you know, overstaying his welcome in a gunfight that it would have just been better to stay out of, because he's got that ability to cross and he's got that ability to snap onto so many different targets. But I'm looking forward to Woodham. The team is well balanced with players who are Slayers, who are extremely talented, and then players who have good sound fundamentals and IGL capabilities. And you've got that with Snipe Drone. So just an opportunity to really explode with this team. And that, I think, on paper lets them kind of contest OpTic. Now, they got a lot of proving to do. I'm not saying that they're going to beat OpTic or that they can or whatever, but this is the best chance Europe has had to get back into top 3 since Legend left. On paper, they're at least top 6. They could probably do more. Outside of that, everybody's wondering what's happening with FaZe, what's happening with Shopify. We're getting teased. We've been getting teased consistently for the past like 2 weeks. This was the roster that was rumored. I saw the video from Tony recently. Tony said a new God Squad in Halo. And Tony's new God Squad, right, was obviously none of this is confirmed. It's all speculation. Frosty, Royal 2, Collect, Last Shot. I wouldn't call it a God Squad. First off, I feel like we have to reserve the term God Squad for players that have won majors at the very least, right? Probably a world championship. Like, I feel like I wouldn't give God Squad to any player that hasn't won worlds. So I would say like these are like the potential of being a God Squad, right? But not a God Squad. Like, can these guys on paper contest the greats? I think so. Now, is it likely? I don't know. The issue right now is Cycle, we know, is the only one still on Shopify. They seem to be ready to announce their roster. Best Man just tweeted, look at it. He's like, he literally just 7 hours ago, he's scheming. He's wearing Space Station merch for probably no reason other than to just like us. Earlier though, he had this one right here.
Flew all the way to LA, tried $20 smoothie, and might have some Halo news soon. Pretty good. Not as good as the roster, though.
Okay, well, there you go. They basically, it sounds like they figured it out. That was over a week ago, November 21st. So I think any minute now, they're going to lock that in. Typically, when a team publicly announces that they're releasing players, that's like kind of a moment where they've locked things in. Like OpTic, for example, has publicly announced that it's releasing Trippy, Dead Zone, Lucid. That was the same moment when they've kind of like locked in their deal, I think. Same thing with Shopify. They released Soul Snipe, Mental, and Suppress, but kept Cycle. So that basically just tells me that Cycle's likely to stay on Shopify. It would have to be Royal 2 and Frosty on Shopify is the only world where I see this happening, which seems less likely to me, versus the rumored roster of this, pulling 2 more players onto FaZe, Dead Zone and Suppressed. And then Cycle, who we already know seems to be a duo with Last Shot, and his tweets seem to reflect the fact that he's a duo with Last Shot. Earlier, Trippy played with them. Right after Worlds, Trippy, Lucid, Cycle, Last Shot was like the first team anybody was talking about, right? They were playing matchmaking together, the 4 of them. Trippy I'm thinking might have stuck with them. That's just my assumption. If he did stick with them, already this is a really good team forming. The only player to round it out that I think makes sense would be Druck, because what seemed to happen, right, is Pure is now half Shopify. Pure announced their roster. Mental confirmed it. Talik, Cherished, and Soul Snipe. It's half Shopify. It's half Pure. They're looking for an org to represent them, by the way. Solid roster. These are all players who have been top 4 throughout the entire year, right? So I have no reason to doubt that they won't continue to be top 4. But when you think of like who were the most prominent standouts on the roster, Cycle, Last Shot were those prominent standouts. And then Druck, when it comes to Pure, I think Druck was definitely a standout as well. Formal Cycle, name dropped him. Formal gave him the gas, Druck, right? Actually. I think he had a great year. And I could see this. The main thing that holds it back, though, is the visa situation. I don't know if Druck can be on an org. I don't know what his situation is. Part of the reason why he spent the whole year unsigned is, I think, because of that visa situation. Like, as long as he's not signed to an org and he's just traveling to the US to be a competitor, not making a salary, I think he's safe. But once he's on an org, I think that's when the complications start to arise. So a Canadian org might make a difference. Hold on a sec. Is Shopify a Canadian org? They're based in TO. I should know this as a Canadian. I have failed my own nationality. That is interesting. I wonder if that gives them any sort of advantage. But this sort of makes sense. 2 members of Shopify over to Pure, 2 members of Pure over to Shopify, right? There's chemistry with Last Shot and Druck because they spent the whole year together. Outside of that, Druck, I have no idea what kind of relationship he has with these other 2 players, right? He's kind of stuck with his same core team and core group since he started as a competitor. This team on paper is pretty deadly. Are they beat OpTic worthy? I don't know. I think whether or not this team is capable of beating like SSG or OpTic kind of lies on Cycle and Last Shot. It lies on like the budding potential of these 2 19-year-olds, basically. Not to give them too much pressure. How much can they show us in this next year with this, shifted roster, assuming this is a thing? It's either something like this. Beyond that, we get into so much theory crafting that I don't even know. Like, I'll make my bold prediction and we'll just kind of sit with this as the prediction and say, cool, let's say this is it. What do you guys think? Would Frosty plus Royal 2 plus Dead Zone suppressed be better than this? We were talking about this earlier. I think every team at the top level needs a Dead Zone, personally. He's the type of guy who makes the right play off spawn. He does the dirty work, and he has the piv capability, right? He's got the experience. He's got the best, most consistent top 2 placing throughout the entirety of Infinite's life. I think you're doing yourself a disservice if you're not putting this guy on a top 3 team. Suppressed has grown extremely quickly in a short period of time from being somebody who I didn't even think about like a few years ago, if that makes sense. I'm still waiting to see what he can do. He's kind of my biggest question mark on the roster. Is it certain? It's not certain. I'd say OpTic is like pretty certain at this point. SSG, not certain, but it's looking likely. But if this doesn't happen, then everything goes and flips up on its head. Just for the sake of like kind of locking things in and then seeing how right or how wrong we were, this is what I guess I'll go with for these 5 right here. Do I think Gunny will be in a team? I think Gunny deserves an opportunity. What do we think of Gunny, chat? At what level? Top 3, top 6, top 8, top 12? At what level does Gunny deserve an opportunity? Top 12? When he at least places top 16 once? Yeah, what's Gunny's highest land placement? Like top 20? He does have first in an FFA. They flipped the map over to live fire and he dominated. Look, so when it comes to individual skill, Gunny's up there. And when it comes to work ethic and like grind time, Gunny's up there, right? Next to maybe Spartan. Honestly, I think Gunny puts in more work than maybe anybody in the scene. Like, the dude's kind of a monster. And his mentality is respectable as well. He's got that belief in the law of attraction. He's got a great positive mindset. You have to have a cemented mentality to get through matchmaking as long as he does. He deserves a shot. What holds him back? He doesn't have accolades. The biggest thing that holds him back is there's not a lot of opportunities to go around. There's not very many orgs. And it sounds like, and we didn't even talk about this more formally, but like what I've been hearing is that there are high tier orgs that have reached out to HCS. I've heard, just trust me, bro, on this. I've heard that TSM has shown interest in Halo Esports, and that they have reached out to HCS to be partnered and they were turned down for partnership. So like I've heard that HCS is turning down like top quality orgs that have shown interest, and if they don't get partnership, they're not in, which is crazy to me, right? Like under what circumstances would you turn down a team like that? The only thing I can imagine is that maybe they don't have the budget to support it, or they can't develop like team skins in time or something like that. Crazy, right? Maybe it's a development constraint, maybe it's a budget related constraint, but like turning down Team Solo Mid is an L. It's a shame, but we're lacking in orgs. We've got a lot of hungry players who want placements, who have better accolades than Gunny. So it's harder to justify taking a gamble, even though he's got the skill. And then the other thing that people like to say is teamwork. Like, I don't really know. I think that maybe one thing for him to think about is how can he bring the best out of his team? Individually, he's there, but how can he be the best possible teammate, bring the best out of his teammates? Beyond that, though, it's really just kind of finessing the networking game. If he wants a good spot, right? Like, can he finesse something with Frosty? I don't know. Can he finesse something with Sparty? Otherwise, I think he should be on a team like Dark Inside, where he has an opportunity to break into top 12, break into top 8, and really kind of pop off, or like a team Lethal Fox or something, or Ascending Baseline, right? He has to somehow be patient, while also being 29. Not that he's like old. I think like his mentality is very young. The way he approaches the game is young. So that's what kind of matters most. You're going to have this like immaculate level of patience and build your network and communication skills and do something that's going to give you accolades so that you kind of like become a better prospect than, say, Boo Boo or Foul, who have the proof. You know what I mean? When it comes to communication, when it comes to bringing the best out of the team that he's a part of and kind of filling whatever kind of role he's sort of thrust into, let's say, maybe there's some learning opportunities there, and maybe you don't get those opportunities unless you have a team to play with. I don't know. We could build a long conversation around it. You've got other people like Ryan Noob, who has publicly posted that he's an FA still. Ryan Noob is still an FA. When it comes to individual skill, you can make an argument for Gunny, but when it comes to like career accolades and networking and background in the sport, you've got other options. And that's the thing with his grind too, is he's building a public following and an audience. He's posting on YouTube and he's regularly on Twitch and whatnot. So he's got a lot of fans. And I think that helps, but that's not what gives you the opportunity in the end of the day. And I talked about this earlier with my commentating, guys. I love casting. Something that I learned is that, as much as I wanted to shine, no matter how good you are, how hard you work, you have to be an excellent team player. You have to bring the best out of the people around you. You got to build strong relationships. That's the tricky thing about this world, right? And it is what holds back a lot of talented Halo players. They'll frown and shake their head and say, oh, that's bullshit. There are some toxic players who are very talented who don't want to change their mentality or don't want to reduce the level of their ego, let's say, to build some strong relationships in the community, and then they never find a team. I used to be a desk caster and a host. Long story anyway. But I guess, the universe told me that I had to learn some lessons. And at the same time, maybe there's a path for me on my own to do something valuable and positive for the community on my own. That's the best mentality I can give it. It's been a long road. Halo players don't have the luxury. You got to be on a team in Halo. As a caster, I could run a watch party and we could figure out a way to make that work, and then maybe one day I'll get another shot. Who knows? As a Halo player, though, unless you're doing FFA, unless you're in the FGC and you're going to be a fighting game player, you got to learn how to cooperate with people, and you got to learn how to be a people person and how to network. That's a huge skill in this. It's a huge skill. I think Roy's one of my favorite players of all time because he's one of those guys who's like, the ego is in his gameplay. His personality is humble, is professional. Everybody loves Roy. The ego is in his shot, is in his BR, right? You can feel it in his gameplay. That's how it's got to be. You got to find that sweet spot.